Your support keeps these stories alive. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell.
My name is David, and I am 41 years old. For the past 15 years, I have poured every ounce of myself into two things: my marriage and my business. Both began around the same time, both built from scratch with sleepless nights, hard work, and sacrifice. And for the longest time, I believed I had everything a man could ever want: a beautiful wife, a best friend who had been with me since childhood, and a thriving company we had built together that provided us more than just income. It provided pride. But life has a cruel way of showing you that what you think is solid can, in reality, be nothing but glass, ready to shatter the moment you least expected. That I met Laura when I was in my mid-20s. She was sharp, ambitious, with a smile that could light up any room. Back then, I didn't have much, just a rundown car, a small apartment, and big dreams. But she believed in me, or at least I thought she did. Together, we imagined a life where money would never be a constant worry, where we could travel, raise kids in comfort, and enjoy the kind of stability neither of us had growing up. At the same time, I was building something else. My best friend, Mark, and I had started a small service business in a rented garage. We worked long hours, sometimes 18 hours straight, fixing equipment, making calls, chasing clients, doing anything to stay afloat. There were months where we didn't know if we could pay rent, but we stuck together. Mark was more than a friend. He was like a brother. We trusted each other with everything. As the years passed, the business took off. We landed a few big contracts, reinvested every dime, and slowly grew into something real. By the time I hit my late 30s, we had an office downtown, a team of 20 employees, and annual revenues in the millions. It was my pride, my legacy. And through it all, Laura was by my side, or so I thought. She hosted dinners, smiled at clients, and told everyone how proud she was of me. I thought we were a team. I thought she was my partner in every sense of the word. But the cracks began to show in small ways. She was spending more time away from home, claiming yoga classes or late dinners with the girls. Mark started having reasons to stay late at the office when I wasn't around. At first, I didn't question it. Why would I? I trusted them both with my life. Then came the night everything shifted. It was a Tuesday. I had finished a late meeting and decided to surprise Laura by picking her up from her class. But when I arrived, the studio was dark. I called her phone. No answer. Something in my gut twisted, but I told myself not to jump to conclusions. I drove home, only to find her car was in the driveway. 2 hours later, she walked through the door, her hair slightly messy, her smile a little too forced. "Sorry, class ran long," she said. I kissed her cheek, but inside, a seed of doubt had been planted. Days later, that seed grew into something undeniable. I had left my laptop charger at the office and decided to swing by late at night. The building was quiet, empty, or so I thought. But as I approached my office, I heard muffled voices. Laughter. A woman's laughter. Laura's laughter. That I froze, my heart slamming against my ribs. Slowly, I opened the door, and there they were, Laura and Mark, my wife and my best friend, wrapped in each other's arms on the couch where I'd spent countless nights planning our future. The world went silent. The only sound was my breath, ragged and sharp, and Laura's gasp when she saw me. "David, it's not what it looks like," she stammered, scrambling to fix her clothes. But it was exactly what it looked like. The two people I trusted most had been betraying me. Under my own roof, in my own office, that I wish I could say I screamed, that I threw punches, that I tore the place apart. But I didn't. I just stood there, numb, staring at the ruins of my life. My best friend, my wife, the two pillars of my world collapsing together. That night, everything I thought I knew about loyalty, love, and trust was obliterated. But what came next, the lies, the betrayal, the legal battles over the business, would make that night look like a spark compared to the firestorm that followed. Because not only had they betrayed me personally, but they had already set in motion a plan to take half of everything I built. And I was about to learn just how deep their betrayal really went. The morning after I caught Laura and Mark together, I woke up in my empty house with the taste of ash in my mouth. I hadn't slept a minute. My body felt heavy, like someone had poured cement into my veins. My phone buzzed nonstop through the night, calls, messages from both of them. I didn't answer. What was there left to say? I sat at the kitchen table staring at the walls, trying to piece together when it all began. How long had they been betraying me? A few weeks? A few months? Maybe years. Every late night, every business dinner, every yoga class she claimed to attend. Were all of them lies? The more I thought about it, the more I realized this hadn't been some sudden mistake. This was deliberate, calculated, and that realization cut deeper than the sight of them together. By midday, I forced myself to go to the office. Part of me wanted to tear the place apart, to scream at Mark in front of everyone, to let the whole staff know what kind of man he really was. But when I stepped into the building, something felt off. The atmosphere was tense. People avoided my eyes. And when I reached my office, I saw a Y dot on my desk was a stack of documents neatly placed in a folder. A note on top in Laura's handwriting read, "We need to talk." I flipped open the folder and my stomach dropped. Divorce papers. Drafted, dated, ready to be filed. And stapled to them were business documents, agreements that outlined a transfer of ownership. Half of my shares in the company would go to Laura as part of the settlement. That IT was like being stabbed twice with the same knife. First as a husband, now as a business partner. A knock at the door pulled me out of my daze. Mark stepped in, his expression rehearsed, a mix of guilt and justification. "David," he began softly, "I didn't want it to happen like this." I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Didn't want it to happen like this? You're sleeping with my wife in our office, Mark. You planned this. Both of you." He flinched but didn't deny it. Instead, he tried to soften his voice. "Listen, man, the business can survive this. You and we can work out a new arrangement. Laura deserves her share, and you deserves—" I cut him off, my voice rising. "She deserves half of what I built, while she was busy sneaking around with you." Mark's mask slipped then. His tone hardened. "Don't make this uglier than it has to be. She's your wife. She's entitled. And let's be honest, without me, this company wouldn't exist either. You don't get to keep it all, David." It was in that moment I realized just how deep the betrayal ran. This wasn't just about lust or an affair. They had been plotting, building a case, setting me up so that when the hammer dropped, I'd be stripped of everything. My marriage, my best friend, my business. I stood there shaking, fists clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. "Get out," I hissed. "Get out before I put you through that window." He left without another word, but his expression told me he wasn't afraid. He thought he had already won. That evening, Laura showed up at the house. She walked in like she still lived there, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. She set her bag down and looked at me with eyes that once made me weak but now filled me with rage. "David," she started calm, almost cold, "we can handle this civilly. You sign the papers, transfer half the business, and we go our separate ways. Fighting will only make it worse." I stared at her, trying to comprehend how a woman I had once loved more than life itself could stand in front of me and speak with such detachment. "Civilly," I spat. "You've been cheating on me with my best friend, and now you want to take half of everything I built. And you expect me to just hand it over." Her lips curled into something between pity and disdain. "I gave you my best years. I supported you when you had nothing. I stood by you while you obsessed over work. Don't act like you did this alone. I earned this." I couldn't believe the audacity. "You didn't earn a damn thing, Laura. I built this business with my blood and sweat. You were too busy tearing it down behind my back." The conversation ended with her slamming the door, leaving me in a house that suddenly felt colder than ever. That night, as I sat alone with the papers spread out before me, I felt the anger boiling into something sharper, something stronger. If they thought I would roll over and let them take half of my life's work, they were wrong, because they had underestimated me, and soon everyone would know exactly who they really were. The days that followed felt like walking through a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Every corner of my life, the house, the office, even the coffee shop where Laura and I used to sit, felt poisoned by betrayal. I couldn't escape the image of her tangled up with Mark in my office, or the cold way she handed me those papers. But once the initial shock dulled, something else took over: resolve. I realized that if I didn't fight back, I would lose everything. Not just my marriage, that was already dead, but the company I had bled for, the legacy I had built with my own hands. They wanted to strip me of half of it, like I was nothing more than a replaceable part. I wasn't going to let that happen. The first step was gathering information. I hired a private investigator. A man named Carlson, rough around the edges but reliable, came highly recommended. When I met him in a dimly lit diner, he leaned across the table and said, "If they've been careless, I'll find it. Affairs leave trails. Emails, hotel receipts, photos. You just need proof to nail them down." It wasn't cheap. Thousands of dollars I would have rather spent on my employees or reinvested into business. But it was worth it. Within 2 weeks, Carlson handed me a thick envelope. Inside were photos of Laura and Mark together at hotels, records of dinners paid with the company credit card, and emails that made me sick to my stomach. There was in black and white. Not only were they betraying me personally, but they had been siphoning company funds to finance their little secret life. Dinners, trips, even a weekend getaway in Las Vegas, all billed as business expenses. I sat at my desk that night with the evidence spread before me, my hands trembling, my jaw tight. The anger was overwhelming, but beneath it was something colder, sharper: strategy. If they wanted war, I was going to give it to them. The second step was my lawyer. His name was Patterson, an older man with steel gray hair and the kind of calm voice that gave you confidence even in chaos. I handed him the folder, and he skimmed through it with raised eyebrows. "Well," he said finally, "this changes everything. Not only do we have grounds to challenge your claim to half the business, but if these expenses were company funded, we could pursue charges. Embezzlement. Fraud." Hearing those words was like a shot of adrenaline. For the first time since discovering the affair, I felt like I had leverage. Still, Patterson cautioned me. "Divorces like this are ugly. If we go public with this evidence, it will tarnish not only them, but the company itself. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about it long and hard. My reputation, my employees, the clients who trusted us, it could all be stained by the scandal. But then I thought about Laura's cold eyes and Mark's smug expression, the way they had planned to gut me like I was nothing. And in that moment, I knew exposing them was the only way. The opportunity came faster than I expected. A week later, we had our quarterly meeting with major clients and investors. Laura showed up in a tailored dress, sitting beside Mark like nothing had happened. She smiled that perfect smile of hers, shaking hands, laughing, acting every bit the supportive wife and trusted partner. My blood boiled watching her play the part. When it was my turn to speak, I stood at the head of the table, the evidence tucked neatly into a folder at my side. My voice was steady, calm, but every word was edged with fire. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, "before we discuss numbers, I need to address something important. Transparency has always been the foundation of this company. And in the spirit of that transparency, I want you all to see exactly how some of our resources have been used." I laid out the photos and receipts one by one. Gasps filled the room. Eyes widened. Laura's smile vanished. Mark shifted uncomfortably, his face draining of color. These are records of funds taken from the company to cover personal expenses. Hotel stays, vacations, dinners. Not business-related. Personal. The room was silent except for the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I looked directly at them, my voice hardening. "I trusted both of you. But what you did wasn't just a betrayal of me. It was a betrayal of every single person who works for this company, who depends on it to feed their families. And I will not let it stand." Laura's face flushed crimson. She tried to speak, but no words came out. Mark leaned forward, stammering something about miscommunication and business development, but the evidence was undeniable. The investors weren't buying it.by the time the meeting ended, whispers filled the room, and I could already see the tide turning. My so-called best friend and my wife had been exposed. Their masks were gone. That night, I sat alone in my office, staring out at the city lights. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. But I also knew this was only the beginning. Exposing them publicly was one thing. Winning the legal battle was another. And they weren't going to go down quietly. The fallout from that meeting spread like wildfire. Within days, whispers about the scandal reached every corner of the company. Employees who once looked at Mark with respect now avoided his gaze. Clients began calling me directly, asking what was happening. Some were supportive, others cautious, but all of them understood one thing. Trust had been broken. Laura, however, was furious. She stormed into my house one evening, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. Her face was twisted with rage. "How dare you humiliate me like that in front of everyone?" she screamed. "Do you know what you've done? You've ruined my reputation." I stood calmly, though my hands were trembling inside my pockets. "Your reputation? You destroyed that yourself, Laura. You and Mark. All I did was show people the truth." She pointed a finger at me, her eyes blazing. "You think you've won? This isn't over. I'm still your wife, and I'm still entitled to half of everything you own. You can't just erase me." Her words cut deep, but I didn't flinch. "You're right. I can't erase you, but I can fight you. And I will." The very next week, the divorce proceedings began. Laura and her lawyer came in swinging, demanding half the business, half the assets, even spousal support. It was laughable if it hadn't been so infuriating. She wanted me to pay her for the privilege of betraying me. While lawyer Patterson was calm but firm. He laid out the evidence of her affair, the misuse of company funds, the blatant fraud. The judge's face darkened as the documents were read aloud in court. Still, Laura's lawyer fought tooth and nail. They painted her as a victim, claiming she had been emotionally neglected, that I had been married to the business and left her lonely. They tried to frame Mark's involvement as purely professional, the affair as a mistake, the financial records as misunderstandings. But evidence doesn't lie. Every receipt, every email, every photo was a dagger into their defense. And though it didn't erase the humiliation I'd suffered, it gave me strength to keep going. Outside the courtroom, the battle was just as fierce. Laura flooded my phone with messages, sometimes begging, sometimes threatening. One day she'd say, "We can still fix this if you drop everything." The next, she'd spit venom. "I'll destroy you if you don't give me what I want." Mark, on the other hand, tried to play it cool. He showed up at the office a few times, acting like nothing had changed, like he could still salvage his role. But the staff's cold stares and the investor's silence told him everything he needed to know. Within a month, he quietly resigned, selling off what little shares he still legally held. For me, the hardest part wasn't the legal wrangling or the public fallout. It was the nights alone, sitting in my empty house, staring at the silence where laughter used to be. I thought about the 15 years I'd given to Laura, the childhood memories I'd shared with Mark, and how easily they had tossed it all aside for lust and greed. One night, I sat with Patterson going over strategies when he looked me straight in the eye and said, "You know, David, this isn't just about money. This is about closure. You need to decide what victory means for you. Is it keeping the business? Is it seeing her walk away with nothing? Or is it something deeper?" I didn't answer right away, because I knew victory wasn't just about winning in court. Victory was about reclaiming myself, my dignity, my future. Weeks turned into months. Court sessions dragged on. Evidence was dissected, arguments thrown back and forth. But slowly, the tide shifted in my favor. The judge acknowledged the fraud, the affair, the misuse of funds. Laura's demands shrank from half the company to a settlement, a much smaller settlement. The day the ruling came, I sat in that courtroom with my hands clenched so tight they hurt. The judge's voice echoed. "Based on the evidence, the court finds that Mrs. Laura's claims to half the business are unfounded. A settlement will be granted, but the majority of assets, including business ownership, remain with Mr. David." Relief washed over me like a tidal wave. It wasn't perfect. She still walked away with money she didn't deserve, but it wasn't the annihilation she had planned. I had kept my company. My legacy was still mine. Laura's face twisted with fury as the ruling was read. Mark wasn't even there. He had slunk off into obscurity, his reputation in ruins. We left the courthouse. Patterson clapped me on the shoulder. "You did it. You fought back." But as I stood there on the courthouse steps, staring at the city skyline, I knew the fight had changed me forever. I wasn't the same man who once believed loyalty and love could withstand anything. I was harder now, colder, but maybe also stronger. And though Laura had taken years of my life, and though Mark had betrayed me in ways I'd never forget, they hadn't destroyed me, that I had survived, and I still had one final chapter to write. When the judge's gavel struck for the last time, I thought the weight would lift off my shoulders instantly. But freedom doesn't come like a lightning bolt. It comes slowly, in fragments, in moments where you finally realize you can breathe without choking on anger. The weeks after the divorce ruling were strange. For the first time in years, I didn't wake up to Laura's voice or Mark's texts about work. I didn't have to brace myself for betrayal lurking in familiar places. Instead, I woke up in silence, in a house that was half empty but fully mine. Laura collected what little she was granted, walking out with her chin high, like she still believed she had won. But the truth was written on her face: bitterness, anger, a deep resentment that she hadn't broken me. She got some money, yes, but not the empire she had planned to steal. Mark didn't even show up on our last day. From what I heard, he had left town, tried to restart his life somewhere far away. His reputation was ashes, his career in ruins. And me? I was left with scars. Not the kind you see in the mirror, but the kind that change the way you look at people forever. Trust, once broken, doesn't grow back the same. I still ran the company, but every handshake felt heavier. Every promise required proof. Point one evening, a few weeks later, I found myself back at the office, long after everyone else had gone home. I sat at the same desk where I once caught them together, and for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt clarity. That couch where their betrayal unfolded was gone. I had it hauled out and burned. The walls had been repainted. It was my space again. I thought back to all the sacrifices I had made to build this life. The sleepless nights, the meals skipped, the friends lost along the way. And I realized something important. Laura and Mark hadn't built me. They hadn't carried me. They had only tried to take from me. But the strength that got me here, that had always been mine. Point one weekend, I drove out to the coast alone. I stood on the cliffs, watching the ocean crash against the rocks, the horizon stretching endlessly. For the first time in months, I felt peace. I whispered to myself, almost like a vow. They took my trust. They tried to take my business, but they didn't take me. And I will never let anyone hold that kind of power over me again. Looking back now, I see their betrayal not as the end of my story, but as a brutal lesson. I learned that loyalty isn't about words, it's about actions. That love without respect is poison. That sometimes the people closest to you can do the deepest damage. But I also learned that I'm stronger than I ever thought. Strong enough to stand alone. Strong enough to rebuild. Strong enough to expose lies and still walk forward, even when my world was burning behind me. My name is David. I am 41 years old. My wife cheated on me with my best friend, and together they tried to take half of everything I built. I exposed them both. I lost years, I lost love, but I didn't lose myself. And that, in the end, is why I'm still standing.